Hello, BookTube. I have a comic book video for you today. We didn't do Epic Comic Book Wednesday yesterday. Michael K Vaughan was busy with real world stuff, and I didn't feel like doing an Epic Comic Book Wednesday without him. Uh, but he made a comic book video today because he was, as ever, mindful of the three people who watch our comic book videos. And he made a video that was fascinating. I'll leave a link to it down below, where it wasn't Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Instead, it was an announcement of his next crackpot reading scheme. he is our number one champion for crackpot reading schemes, and he has an idea. He's had it for a while now. He's actually put a lot of mileage on it. I've talked about it before, where he is going to read the entire first volume of the canonical Marvel characters. So the Marvel characters that were part of the Stan Lee reinvention of the superhero genre in the 1960s. Starting off with the Fantastic Four, he is reading all of the Fantastic Four from Volume 1. So Fantastic Four from number 1 all the way to when it was canceled in an absolute farce called Heroes Reborn, where that numbering ended. And he's going to do all the others, too. He did all of Thor. And the reason that I scrump up my face is because I have read those runs. I've done those first volumes myself, almost all. I haven't read all of the Hulk. Who would? And I don't know if he's going to punish himself with Nick Fury or anything like that. But Fantastic Four, the Avengers especially, Thor, Doctor Strange, Daredevil. I imagine he's going to go through all of those. And the reason I scrump up my face is because, as with any ongoing comic book, your writers and artists are changing all the time. Or at least changing regularly enough so that you will have doldrums. You will have long stretches where the book just is not good. Now, that was always an acid test for comic book fans such as myself, because on the one hand, you've got that comfortable momentum. But on the other hand, you don't want to be buying a comic book for, 50 cents. It's a lot of money that you're not going to enjoy. That's not good. That's gone in a creative direction that you don't like, or that has terrible artwork in my case. And some Marvel comics made the cut and some didn't. All DC comics made the cut. The real comics. There was never a time when I was going to consider not buying adventure comics, when I was going to not buy Superman or Action Comics or Justice League. There was never a time when I was going to do that. But with Marvel comics, some of them made the cut and some of them didn't. I followed Thor through the whole way, even the worst parts in the world. And likewise, the Avengers. And the Avengers have had some great periods, but they've also had some absolutely horrible periods that I followed them anyway, but I didn't enjoy it. But there were other titles where I just stopped. When they had obviously stumbled into adulthood, I just stopped. And the crackpot reading scheme that Mike was talking about today was Spider-Man. He's going to read the entire first volume of Spider-Man, starting in the character's first appearance in Amazing Fantasy, then moving over to his own book, and working your way through that whole period. This is created by Stan Lee with art by the inimitable Steve Ditko. The story of a teenage high school student who is bitten by a radioactive spider and somehow gets superpowers. He doesn't get spider powers. That's often said, that he's bitten by a radioactive spider and gets spider powers. He doesn't. He doesn't grow any extra limbs. He doesn't grow any extra eyes. He has a preternatural spider sense that alerts him to impending danger. I think any of us can tell from personal experience that actual spiders don't have that sense. He becomes physically stronger and faster. So he becomes, we're told that he has the proportional strength and speed of a spider. He can lift 10 or 15 tons. He can move fast enough so that in combination with his spider sense, he can pretty much guess and or dodge gunfire. He has adhesive skin, so most commonly we see it on his hands and feet, but it's his whole body that he can will to stick to things. So he can climb walls and hang on ceilings and whatnot. And he is a scientific genius. The Peter Parker that is the high school student is in Stan Lee's original conception, is a scientific genius. He comes up with a web fluid in cartridges that he keeps on his wrist that he can spray out. The sound effect was thwip. That's incredibly tensilely strong. It's incredibly durable. And this character was originally Stan Lee's tongue-in-cheek idea of an answer to Superman. You've got Superman, who is a DC character, the greatest superhero of them all, and he is a god. He is tall. He is permanently in his early 30s, so he's not a kid. We have adventures of him as a kid, but Superman is a man. And he's indestructible. He's all-powerful. He has a giant, majestic, flowing red cape. And only plays a bungler in the guise of Clark Kent. He isn't actually a bungler. And Stan Lee thought, well, that's not happening, man. That's not hep. The kids want a hero with hang-ups. Instead of giving them Superman, let's give them Spider-Man. So we got Spider-Man, and he took off. Oh my God, did this character take off. An unbelievably popular thing. Probably the single most popular comic book creation of all time. It wasn't immediate, but it did happen in fairly short order, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that all other comic book characters, even Batman, toil in the shadow of this one. If that's not true, then the only comparison is Batman. From the real superhero comic book company, from DC Comics. And Michael K. Vaughan apparently is going to read the entire first volume of Spider-Man. So that's all of Spider-Man, but then, after decades of publication, including ups and downs, although I will point out that Spider-Man as a comic book creation for that first volume had fewer doldrums than any other comic book character. Spider-Man was easy to buy every month. Necessarily so. Once you realize this is your flagship character, you're going to put your best people on it if you can. So there was never a time where Herb Trimpe drew Spider-Man. There was never a time where they said, well, our John Romita Sr. is leaving the book, so let's get George Tuska. There was never a time when that was true. So Spider-Man was always pretty easy to read. But after decades of that kind of popularity, Marvel Comics did something that was almost never done. They gave Spider-Man a second concurrent book. The Amazing Spider-Man was still ongoing, but suddenly we got a first issue of something called The Spectacular Spider-Man. Not this. This was a Treasury edition from decades before. We got a first issue of The Spectacular Spider-Man. Just a separate book. I know that's absolute par for the course now, but it wasn't then. And I guess Mike's rewrit for this latest crackpot reading expedition is going to be to read that as well. All of Spectacular Spider-Man, maybe all of Web of Spider-Man, all of that stuff, until Heroes Reborn. And so he did a video today. I'll leave a link to it. He did a video today about Spider-Man, just in general, and about what this journey is going to be like. And it's pretty tempting. I was pretty tempted with Thor. I pretty much did read along with his Thor event, even through some of the doldrums, because the high points of Thor, for me, are the high points of Marvel Comics. The high points of Thor and a couple of high points in the Avengers are pretty much the only moments where Marvel Comics is ever anywhere near as good as even an average DC comic. I know none of you agree with that, but still, I was intrigued. Rereading the earliest days of Spider-Man, rereading the great era where Stan Lee was writing the thing and John Romita Sr. was drawing it, creating the visual template of Spider-Man that we still know today. Just going on and on from there. John Romita Sr. drew the book for a long time. Then Ross Andru drew it for a long time, and Ross Andru is he's a little bit more workaday comic book artist, but one that I like. He's quirky. So not everybody liked him, but I liked him. And he was on Spider-Man for a long time. There was also a glorious period where John Romita Jr., John Romita Sr.'s son, drew Spider-Man. He has come back and forth. He's been on and off Spider-Man, the character, for 40 years. And he is great. In my opinion, of course, he's not as good as his father, but he's totally different and wonderful. And there were some absolutely sublime issues where John Romita Jr. provided the pencils and John Romita Sr. inked them. I don't think Spider-Man ever got prettier, just better done than in those issues, just a handful of them. Uh, and so on. I mean, the book fell prey to collector mania at the same time that all the rest of the comic book industry did, and right at the heart of collector mania was a writer and artist named Todd McFarlane. Mike and I, I'm sure, will get around to Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man. I followed the book mostly through all of those, so I was smiling through Mike's video, but I was also wagging a finger. Because in addition to talking about the historical significance of this character, Michael K. Vaughan was also talking about how great this character is. And everybody thinks that, how great Spider-Man is, and that's not true. That's not true. Like most of Stan Lee's original edible stable of superhero characters, Spider-Man is actually almost the quintessence of evil. Peter Parker, for instance, is a science nerd. He is not popular in school. He's not the brash jock, or he's not good with the ladies or whatnot. And he lives with his aunt and uncle out in the suburbs, and they pamper and spoil him. They give him anything that he wants, even though it's pretty clear that they aren't always able to easily afford it. His parents are not dead. They're just not present. He's not an orphan. He's living a spoiled, pampered life. And in those early issues, when he's talking to his schoolmates at high school, he doesn't seem like all that nice a person. And boy, oh boy, is that underscored when he is bitten by that radioactive spider. He's bitten by a radioactive spider and accidentally learns that he has superpowers. He can cling to walls. He can crush a steel pipe in his hand. And what's his first thought? Well, I got to make money off this. I got to profit off this. I got to make bank. So he becomes a masked wrestler who will take on all comers and has headlines events, makes tons and tons of money, and insists that it be in cash, Mac. And when you go back and read those early panels of that Steve Ditko Spider-Man, it's hard to remember, because I think Stan Lee wants you to forget, that you're looking at a 15-year-old. For a 15-year-old to be that way immediately upon getting superpowers means that the 15-year-old was already that way. The early Amazing Fantasy stories of Peter Parker as Spider-Man are basically a story of what would happen if Andrew Tate got superpowers. And no Spider-Man fan wants to admit that. They don't ever want to admit that. And he becomes proud, egotistical, and at one point, famously in that first issue, he is standing there, in the hallway, and a man is running towards him, and a cop is chasing the man, and the cop yells out to him, "Stop that guy, he's a thief." And Spider-Man doesn't do it. He doesn't stop the thief. The cop says, "What, did you hear me? I told you, the guy's a thief. Why didn't you stop him?" Spider-Man says, "Hey, it's not my problem. He didn't do anything to me. He's not taking any money out of my hand." And in a classic, TV melodrama twist, when Peter Parker goes home, there are police cars at his house, and it's a tragedy because his Uncle Ben has been shot dead by that thief. That very thief that he let go by eventually gets around to Uncle Ben and shoots him dead. And this grief shatters Peter Parker's innocence. It shatters his life. And he decides, as Michael K. Vaughan correctly says, out of guilt, that he will turn over a new leaf. He will no longer sell his powers to the highest bidder. Instead, he will fight crime. He will see to it that he never makes that mistake again. Cue the trumpets, close the issue. And what I want to point out to people, what I've been wanting to point out to people, I've been pointing it out to Spider-Man fans for 60 years, is that that's a terrible motivation for a character. That's terrible. That means that Peter Parker, after that incident, once he becomes Spider-Man, doesn't really care about right and wrong. He's just doing it for his own psychological benefit. He's just doing this out of guilt. Where is that anywhere in the DC line? I mean, keep in mind, I'm not talking about Denny O'Neil's reinvention of Batman. I'm talking about the original Batman, who is definitely not trying to hunt down the criminals that killed his parents. He comes out of that perfectly well adjusted and wants to fight crime, to do right in the world. And Batman is the only quivering example in the DC original stable. Other than that, There's nothing even close to it. Everyone else in the real superhero roster simply wants to fight evil because it's evil, not because it got past your guard and killed your uncle. It's a terrible motivation to be a superhero, and it gets worse in a little detail that Spider-Man fans always thought was clever, and Stan Lee loved it. He repeated it over and over again in issues. Eventually, Peter Parker gets a job at the Daily Bugle, a big newspaper in New York City. And he gets that job on the strength of his photography. So in addition to creating this, patentable web fluid, he is also a great photographer. And he gets that job at the Daily Bugle on the strength of his photography because he can get action photos of Spider-Man that no one else can get. Spider-Man stops a jewelry heist and bounces all around, disarming and knocking unconscious the jewelry thieves, and webs them up to a lamppost next to their truck just as the police are showing up. And somehow, Peter Parker gets those photos when no one else was around because no one knew it was going to happen. And just like the age-old gimmick of the Daily Planet in Superman, where Lois Lane somehow does not put together that Clark Kent is never around when Superman is, and often has exclusive stories about Superman that she couldn't get. Just as in there, that is completely unlikely. It is that the very first thing that not just Lois Lane, but any reporter at the Daily Planet would have figured out is that, oh, well, obviously Clark Kent is Superman. He said that obviously he is Superman. The same thing would have been true at the Daily Bugle. The first reporter, the first person, Robbie Robertson, the managing editor, not even J. Jonah Jameson, the publisher, the first person with any kind of logic training would say, well, okay, there was no way at all, there was no police scanners at the time, there's no way at all that you, a 16-year-old high school student, could have known that this jewelry robbery was going to happen. The only way you could have got these pictures if you were Spider-Man. That's the only way. And Peter Parker eventually he floats some lame idea about how he and Spider-Man are friends, how they're partners, how they divvy up his proceeds and whatnot. That makes no sense. No one ever believes it or seems to believe it. But it raised a question in me a lot with those Spider-Man comics where are we really sure that Peter Parker, A, isn't staging some of these things to make his paycheck, and B, are we 100% sure that he would stop that jewelry robbery if he didn't have any film in his camera? If it wasn't a paycheck for him? Are we 100% sure that he wouldn't? He's acting out of guilt and, I guess, greed. He's not acting out of anything else. It's not like he's looking at a jewelry robber and saying, well, that's wrong, I should intervene. Do we know that Peter Parker is ever any really different from that indifferent, loutish teenager who lets a thief run by? Do we know that? Does he ever have a moment where he seems to personally change? I don't think so. I don't think that moment is anywhere in Spider-Man. Now, I know the Dude Bro Spider-Man fans and Michael K. Vaughan are going to say that is the issue, Spider-Man no more. If they can't talk about this man, this monster, then they're going to talk about Spider-Man no more. I don't see it. I've read that issue 100 times. I don't see it. I don't see anything here that is good in any way. But I was willing to mosey along. Spider-Man always seems to be in the right place at the right time. He's always managed. He has a great rogues gallery, so he's always managing to fight colorful villains. Always there seems to be that fatal element of compromise, moral compromise. Always there does. Where I'm looking at a story and I'm saying, okay, you're doing this, but would you do it just on its own? If it weren't hurting your career at the Daily Planet, or if it weren't making you jealous about a girlfriend or something like that. I know that we're supposed to be enjoying these things because they're real human hang-ups with feet of clay. And that's okay, I guess. I don't know why anyone would want to read that, but that's okay, I guess, provided it doesn't make me ask the fundamental question, which is, all right, you've got hang-ups, you've got feet of clay, you're a normal person, but would you actually act here if you weren't personally involved? How many Spider-Man stories do I see, have I read, where I ask that question and I honestly don't know the answer? That's bad. That's a bad hero. And I was moving along, I was moseying along with the whole thing. I was thinking, all right, well, he's still fighting crime, and there's great artwork, and these can sometimes be funny and whatnot. Until we got to a storyline much later on, it'll take Mike years to get there, where Spider-Man literally makes a deal with the devil to save his Aunt May's life. But it isn't just to save her life. It's to rework reality. He mucks with the lives of millions and millions, if not billions of people, so that he can have his way. So that he can have his selfish way. Instead of not only saying no to the devil, but punching him. Superman, Wonder Woman, they would have punched the devil. They would have thought up a way to get the outcome they want without making a deal that wipes the memories of 4 billion people. That's truly, that is not the act of a hero. At one point in one storyline, this will be later than Mike is reading, but at one point in one storyline, Peter Parker becomes a Mark Zuckerberg style tech bro, a tech millionaire, widely recognized in society's shorthand as villains, and he becomes that. There's also the quintessential, intentionally ambiguous moment in Spider-Man in a storyline that Michael K. Vaughan and I have talked about, and that he will certainly get to, where a supervillain has kidnapped his girlfriend, Gwen Stacy. Again, would there be a confrontation if the Green Goblin had not done that? had captured just some random receptionist from Midtown. Would Spider-Man even be concerned? I don't know. I can't answer that question, and neither can you. Whereas with Superman, you absolutely can answer that question. But the Green Goblin captures his girlfriend, has her on top of the Brooklyn Bridge, and kicks her off to throw her, into the water far below. And Spider-Man whips out his web to stop her fall, and the abrupt stop of her fall snaps her neck. And the artwork makes it very clear that that is what's happening. That it's Spider-Man's action that's causing her neck to snap, not the Green Goblin. So if Spider-Man had made a web cushion underneath her, or if he'd swung to grab her himself, she would have lived. She would have woken up and lived. So the writer there just intentionally introduces the kind of moral ambiguity that I'm talking about. Accidental in that case, but still. I just wanted to make this video in response to Mike's video to mention that I will almost certainly be reading a ton of Spider-Man right along with him silently. We won't do a lot of it together, but silently, I love these reading projects with him. Absolutely love them. And it's long since time that I did. I will probably, after I do these for Spider-Man and Daredevil and Doctor Strange, I will not do it for the Hulk. But I will do it for the Submariner, which I don't think Mike will do. The X-Men, the Avengers. Once I've done this massive read-along, just issue by issue, in chronological order from start to finish, I really doubt that I'll ever do it again in my life. So, yay. There's one purpose of the video, is that, yay, this is wonderful, I can't wait. And the other purpose of the video is to point out that Spider-Man is the quintessence of evil. So there you go. There's your comic book video for poor recovering Hannah. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.